Hey, Liberty Expert Nation, it's Tim Moen here, and David is gone away on the beaches of Florida for vacation. I'm having some special guests on in the meantime, and this episode came about because David and I did an episode on the Great Reset, and we talked about a few solutions just off the top of our head. And we got a fan of ours was a little bit upset and left a comment that said we didn't address cryptocurrency, and we haven't addressed cryptocurrency yet on this podcast. He couldn't believe it. You know, how can we call ourselves libertarian? How can we talk about freedom when we don't talk about cryptocurrency? I thought it was a fair point. We haven't talked about it. I guess I take for granted, that cryptocurrency is awesome and that everyone should look into it. I've been interested in cryptocurrency for probably about 10 years now. I looked into Bitcoin when it was like $2 or $3 a coin, and I educated myself on it. I even thought about starting a mining business and doing all that sorts of thing. And then I just, it was too difficult at the time for me. It was going to take a lot of effort, but cryptocurrency's come a long ways in the meantime. And so this commenter got me in touch with some folks that are involved in a cryptocurrency called Epic Cash. And so today I have one of those guys on. His name is Murray Friedman, and I'd like to welcome you. Murray, by the way, is going to be hidden behind, you're not going to be able to see his face. His voice is going to be changed because the stuff we're talking about today, guys, is pretty powerful stuff. The central banks and governments do not want you to engage in this stuff because it gives you personal liberty, it gives you personal freedom, it gives you, it takes you outside of their power over your commerce. And so these guys have some legitimate concerns about their identity being kept secret. So we're going to take some efforts to safeguard their identity. I don't even know who they are in real life. But Murray Friedman, welcome to the Liberty Experts. Thanks for coming on.
It's my pleasure, Tim. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, so let's get into it right from the start. A lot of my audience may not know much about cryptocurrency, if anything. You know, I know that my normie friends, if I go to work, they talk about how the price of Bitcoin, and a few guys have like speculated on it and invested in it. But these are just normies that don't really understand the power behind it. What should my users know if they don't know anything about cryptocurrency? Can you just kind of briefly describe it for us?
It gets very complicated with the reasons why it works, but if we look at the net outcome of what it produces as a system, I like to think of Bitcoin as a financial battery. Its job is to always require $1 worth of electricity for people to put in the computational power to get $1 of value back out of the system in the future. And yeah, the price goes up and down a lot. As Wall Street gets more involved, it's increasingly manipulated. We were at 3,000 not too long ago. Now we're at 20, and a lot of people are talking about 200,000 and 300,000. So it's extremely volatile asset, but over time, we are 11 years in and the results are clear that nothing, not even including gold, has ever been shown to store value over time like this digital scarcity form. It's an economic system that we call Bitcoin. And what we did with Epic Cash is just say, if we had a clean sheet design based on 10 years later technology in terms of how to architect the blockchain, what would that design look like? And so we built an upgraded version of Bitcoin that has the same economic properties in terms of being able to store wealth, because it's the exact same emission of 21 million coins that there will never be any more, and a competitive mining process to create them. So we think Epic is a graceful, backward compatible upgrade path for Bitcoin.
Right. Okay. And so, yeah, we'll talk about, a little bit more of the technical details of Epic Cash and how folks can get a hold of some and look into it a bit more. But I just want to talk a little bit about what makes cryptocurrency so powerful right now. And you kind of compared it a little bit to gold. And that's kind of what I used to do too when I talked about cryptocurrency. It has a lot of the same properties that gold had that made gold valuable as money, as currency, in that, there's a limited quantity. You're not going to, unless a meteorite hits Earth and like brings us it's solid gold, the amount of gold in the world isn't likely to go up all that much. It's relatively stable. And so we can expect there's not going to be much more. It's easily divisible. We can whittle it down to smaller and smaller bits, like a little ounce or smaller, and exchange it. And that's what makes it valuable. And we can, exchange that. Now, cryptocurrency has those same characteristics in that there's a limited quantity. With the case of Bitcoin and Epic Cash, there's 21 million, like you said, and we can whittle it down to smaller denominations. And the one benefit it has over gold is that we can send it almost instantaneously across the world. So we don't have to physically transport this stuff around. Is that a fair assessment of why cryptocurrency is valuable as money, or is there more to it?
Well, that's a good start. I would say that above all else, of all the magical properties that the Satoshi Nakamoto system that we call Bitcoin has, the ability of people to know exactly what the supply of currency will be at any future point in time and have that be baked into the protocol, immutable beyond the machinations of man. That's what you're really paying for, because now with COVID, there's trillions of dollars being printed. And for what? I mean, it seems like a smash and grab, the same kind of like mortgage crisis stuff that we saw here in the States after 2008. It's a fundamentally dishonest system that acts as an upward wealth transfer mechanism through something known as the Cantillon effect. And so back to gold, what brought me to Bitcoin as someone with a keen interest in Austrian economics and the history of money is that gold has a paradigm of relative scarcity, where if we just do a simple thought experiment and the price of gold doubles, every marginal mine that is currently out of production will be considered to be brought back in production. If the price of gold went up 100 times, Elon Musk would figure out how to bring an asteroid down from space because it'd be economically viable to do that. Or maybe nuclear fusion or something like that. It becomes a straightforward engineering function mated to the financial function at that point. But in Bitcoin, and by extension Epic, which follows the Bitcoin standard monetary policy, exactly the same after 2028, when the supply curves match up, is you have absolute inflation protection no matter what goes on at the central bank level in the fiat world. You can never make any more Bitcoin or Epic beyond what's baked into the protocol. So it's what's known as absolutely inelastic with respect to price on the supply side. And so really what you're paying for there is the rights to digital scarcity. There's only 21 million slots on this ledger. In the one case, it's one type of blockchain that Bitcoin has. It's about a 300 gigabyte chain file, whereas that same data on Epic, because of the newer compression technology called Mimblewimble, it's about a 1 gigabyte file. And when you're talking about an older generation cell phone in a village in Africa, the difference between a $200 cell phone and a $20 cell phone, being able to run the whole system, it makes a lot of difference. And so the functions of money are store of value, medium of exchange, and unit of account. The properties of a good money, as you mentioned, are not only scarcity, but divisibility. You can't really cut an ounce of gold much beyond a 10th ounce before it becomes not practical, whereas there's 100 million units per Bitcoin and per Epic. So you've got a great increase in divisibility. Also portability, you can send money anywhere, anytime on both of these networks without having to trust someone in the middle. And you can't exactly do that for gold. You have to trust whoever you're shipping the gold to, even if you meet them personally. You also have a physical dimension to transacting in gold that you don't have when you're dealing in what I think of as the new digital gold, which is a Bitcoin standard monetary asset, a synthetic monetary commodity like Bitcoin or Epic. And then you get into recognizability, which is that counterfeit gold is a real issue. You may have heard in China, I think it was about 2 months ago, there was a multi-billion-dollar scandal of fake gold. And then you get into counterparty risk and all kinds of other risks that you don't have with a pure digital asset that you can self-custody like you can Bitcoin or Epic. And then there's some other ones, but without belaboring the point, all of the functions that gold as the best money, the base of the extras pyramid of the entire monetary system, all of its best properties are matched or exceeded by these new types of an even harder money. And Bitcoin is to gold what Epic is relative to Bitcoin. And the reason that Epic improves upon Bitcoin is because of a property known as censorship resistance. Increasingly, there are people who are standing in the way, blocking your Bitcoin transactions or otherwise restricting your ability to use the system. And so
how do they do that? How do they block Bitcoin?
Okay, so as an example, you can't really run a node because of that 300 gigabyte chain file.
Right.
If you run a node, the system is composed of miners and nodes and users. And the original design was that everyone mines and everyone runs their own node, which is basically your system can validate the entire state of the system and add a new transaction to the system on an entirely peer-to-peer basis without having to trust anybody. Now, when you download a wallet through the App Store or Play Store or whatever, you're connecting to someone's server to trust them to give you the right version of the blockchain. And I'm sure, you know.
And sorry, Murray, is that because my understanding is, I'm about to maybe expose myself as completely ignorant on this stuff now, but it's because the ledger of Bitcoin, which is held on every one of these nodes, is an account of all the Bitcoins that exist and all the transactions that exist. Is that right? And so every time there's a transaction, it keeps adding to the amount of space, right? And so this is why now it's grown to a point where it's too cumbersome to have on a wallet on your device. It has to be on these powerful servers.
Yeah, and then with centralization becomes degradation of censorship resistance, because as a mining pool operator, as an example, in the original design, you would mine on your computer and have a competition to solve blocks. And then as more computers came onto the network, you couldn't really find a block anymore, because in Bitcoin there's only 144 per day. And so people teamed up in pools to gather together to have a greater chance of winning the blocks, and then they spread it out. So you've got pools now that are whitelisting and blacklisting transactions. So if you get what are known as tainted coins, let's say you sold your car to somebody, he pays you in Bitcoin. Okay, that sounds great. But what if that guy is a terrorist, or a pornographer, or a drug dealer, or any one of these bad things? You know, it's the coins are authentic, but now because that person that you got them from is deemed to be a bad actor, every money that he ever touches, and now you're connected to him through that transparent blockchain forever. You can have a knock on your door at 4 o'clock in the morning because, hey, like financially, you look like you're involved in this proceeds of crime flow, and all you thought was a guy showed up to buy your old car for $1,000 of Bitcoin, and that's been mainly a theoretical problem. But now exchanges, as the space grows up, people are taking a more adult approach to regulation, and they're saying, okay, cooperating with the law is better than trying to be a scofflaw. A lot of the early cowboys have come to ruin from not respecting the power of the powers that be, regardless of their political leanings. We live in the real world, and we have to comply with the laws of the land. And so in this increasingly regulated environment, what you have is so-called know your transaction technology that uses AI filters, that you can have your account shut down and blocked and banned because somebody sent you some coins that happen to be bad, and they don't even know they're bad. They just got them from some site that doesn't have the appropriate risk controls. And so increasing amounts of this network are just dangerous places where it's not safe to tread. And so you have a two-tier market of so-called clean coins that are either freshly mined, or they're coming through one of these highly regulated gateways, or this Wild West where, maybe they're dark net or gambling or other stuff. And so it's not one system. You have these little walled gardens that are emerging.
Right. And isn't that interesting? I mean, that is, it's a case study in something like crony capitalism in a sense, because you have, you have these increasingly have to centralize these nodes on more powerful servers, which means people with, lots of resources are able to do this. And usually people with lots of resources resources are well connected with government. They don't want to rock the boat. You know, they might be getting some sort of monopoly privileges from the government in form of IP protection and, you know, regulatory barriers for competitors. And so they have every incentive to play ball with the government and maybe even lobby them to get favorable regulation. And those people are the ones that then control whether your wallet is can access your Bitcoin or not, because it's connected to your server. And it's just like you know, any big tech company like a Facebook and all the cancel culture that's attached to it because of the kind of oligopoly that statism creates, because the statist infrastructure. I was talking with someone about this on Facebook who was saying, well, what's the big deal about cancel culture? I mean, they're just private companies ostracizing people. I'm like, well, yeah, that's true if it were a libertarian capitalist society, but the violence comes in when you are prohibited from engaging in competitive enterprise with these companies. So banking, airlines, you know, big tech companies, all these companies that we rely on for our day-to-day commerce and economic life and just life in general. We can essentially be canceled from them, and we're prohibited from starting any kind of competing enterprise to draw people that are being canceled. So, you know, you better make sure that you know, you take the vaccine. You better make sure that you aren't skeptical of the climate catastrophe narrative. You better not fall outside the cathedral of allowable opinion that the mainstream media and the government has, or your commercial life will be ruined. And it seems to me, based on what you're saying, that Bitcoin is becoming more and more like that because of these giant servers that are controlled by wealthy, well-connected people. Was that be fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I like to say is that if you want to get the money out of politics, a better way to do it would be to get the politics out of money. And so with the existing financial system, you have countries that are deemed to be bad actors, and maybe they are, maybe they're not. It's not my place to say. But when the US blocks Russian, Chinese, Venezuelan, the list of countries goes on, access to the financial system through its control of the SWIFT system, that prompts those countries to try and create their own systems. And then you have all the friction of the interchange. Wealth can't really flow between those two systems because of the barriers that are put up. Right. And so the design of the Epic Cash Network is modeled after the internet. We have a true neutral protocol layer that no one can get control of. The economics that are underpinned by the game theory of the mining process have been proven that system is prohibitively expensive to capture. And that's a big part of why the price of BTC, which increasingly I would draw a distinction, is no longer Bitcoin, and Epic Cash is more Bitcoin than BTC. But that's why we've seen it go to $20,000, and in the eyes of many, it's poised to go well beyond that. And the specific reason why Epic provides greater accessibility to the next 10 million people beyond the 1 million people that currently own Bitcoin, we think Epic Cash will be the first Bitcoin that most people know, is because you cannot mine Bitcoin today unless you have the money and the connections to buy the latest specialty high-end computers from China that are behind a 30% tariff wall and a 6-month lead time and a huge capital cost to build out. At every stage of the mining ecosystem, you have this increasing centralization. And Epic is built on a multi-algorithm design that enables supercomputers and cell phones and everything in between to all take turns securing the network through mining. And so because of that, really any unused silicon out there on the planet can be brought into service, converting electricity into coins, which spreads them into greater hands. And so 85% of the BTC that will ever exist already does, and it's increasingly in hedge fund billionaire hands rather than the small guy plugging in a computer in his basement hands. Whereas the economics post 2028 are exactly the same. There will be 20.3 million coins for both the Epic and the Bitcoin or BTC networks as of those times. but Epic is only 45% emitted. And so those next 10 million coins are up for grabs. And they're a chance for people to rewind the clock and say, man, I wish I would have bought more Bitcoin back when it was X dollars. Okay, well, Epic is 50 cents today, and it's going to have the same supply as BTC, but greater storage capacity to actually send payments. Bitcoin or BTC fees were $80 in December 2017 during the last boom, and we saw $14 when the network wasn't even that full. So a lot of people that are small holders in the BTC economy are going to be forced out through these centralizing forces. And we think that Epic provides a graceful upgrade path for the hard money standard of Bitcoin onto a more modern and performant architecture.
Right. And will Epic ever face the same problems Bitcoin is facing right now with, you know, a growing ledger that is that you can't keep, where now things have to be centralized a bit? Or
no, because the compression technology of Mimblewimble, essentially all the coins that are used in any given block, which is 1 minute, are melted down and reissued. And instead of storing every transaction that has ever happened so that it keeps getting bigger and bigger, it just records the state of who owns the coins today. So apples to apples, it should always be 90+% more compressed. Now, whether that's 95 or 99 or 92, I don't know. But at every stage, the BTC blockchain will always be larger and more large given any transaction volume than the Epic Cash chain. So at a certain point, it will be natural for people to use it as a stand-in. It's also faster. Not only is it cheaper on the fees, but it's faster because a Bitcoin transaction takes 10 minutes. That's the block interval. Epic is currently 1 minute, but we're looking at, we know how to take that down safely to 30 seconds, 15, and even lower. So there's a lot of different scaling things that we can do to add capacity. And that's even before we lay other blockchains pipes and connect them together.
Okay, I want to get into how we can get a hold of some Epic Cash and you know, some of the concerns I might have about crypto in general. But I just want to lay the groundwork here for our audience about, because some of them might be thinking, okay, this sounds pretty cool. You've said a bunch of technical stuff, and okay, we're convinced this stuff is pretty legit and solid, but you know, why don't you know, people have this tendency of comparing it to fiat currency, right? And you know, some of the things I've seen of concern lately, I just saw an article today talking about how house prices in Canada are expected to go on average up to $620,000 on average for house prices next year. Now, this sounds incredible to me. It sounds like there's a whole lot of fuckery going on because right now we have essentially an economic lockdown. I mean, productivity has never been lower, and yet house prices seem to be going up and people are buying houses. Now, how is this possible? And of course it's possible because the government artificially suppresses interest rates, keeps them down while close to rock bottom, but they might as well be negative right now. And then on top of that, you have all this printing and debt, money printing going on, and debt happening. So basically, Liberty Expert Nation, what's happening is any savings you have right now is being robbed. The buying power of your cash is being robbed. The wage you make at work, expect that to, even though, you know, maybe you make $40 an hour at work, that $40 is going to buy you half as much in the not too distant future because government is robbing you of the buying power of your money. And that's why anyone who's paying attention right now should be afraid of what's coming down the pipe economically. And this is why we need to be prepared and have some sort of insurance and have some sort of, you know, survival mechanism and maybe even flourishing mechanism. Maybe there's even a way that coming out of this economic catastrophe, we can set ourselves up better if we see it coming and approach it properly. And so this is why, to me, this is such an important conversation, because cryptocurrency may offer that solution to us because it's out of the control of the government. And it sounds like Bitcoin has some weak points in it, and Epic Cash has solved those issues. But Murray, can you help us understand help alleviate some people's fear around cryptocurrency? So, they might be worried, okay, I can't just go out to the grocery store and buy bread with this stuff. They might be worried that, look, there's so many different cryptocurrencies out there on the market. Isn't there a problem with competition? And in other words, doesn't the competition in cryptocurrency devalue cryptocurrency, because it's like there's an unlimited amount of cryptocurrency, different types of cryptocurrency. So doesn't that delimit the value? How would you respond to those kinds of concerns?
So that's a lot. I'll try to remember them all, but taking them in backwards order, there are only about a half a dozen actual currencies if you go to CoinMarketCap and look, there's about 5,000 on there. Almost all of those are tokens that run on Ethereum, that their job is not to be money. Their job is to be like a prepaid credit for some network that they're building. So let's say you're going to access data storage services. Rather than buying it from Amazon, you can buy it from a decentralized network of people called Filecoin that are renting their hard drive space and getting paid in coins. And so if you think you're going to need a certain amount of storage in the future and you can get it at a better price today, then it makes sense to kind of prepay for that. And the decentralized market responds in turn. So there's only about 10 that are actual currencies. And most of them, like Bitcoin, most of them are built on Bitcoin code. So there's only so much differentiation you can do at a technical basis when you're grafted onto the same root stock. So Litecoin, as an example, is a top 10 coin that's been around for almost 10 years. And they're trying to implement privacy features as an optional, like you can use it if you want to, and the individual exchanges and wallets and pools and everybody will decide whether they support it. And I think most people won't. We use that same technology called Mimblewimble that Litecoin is introducing. They're introducing it in the future as an optional thing, which if you want to say, hey, I'm suspicious and I have something to hide, let me opt into this privacy thing. Or you can have all transactions always private today without having to have the other old chain attached to it. And so there's just what's known as less technical debt. It's a newer architecture. There are no other coins that have this technology that are built on a fresh basis. And I think it's kind of absurd that we wouldn't dream of using a 2010 era cell phone because you just couldn't do all these wonderful things that we can do today. And Epic, whereas Bitcoin is frozen in time in terms of the way that the initial system parameters were set into place, that they're not easy to change, as a completely fresh network that's not beholden to the existing industries that are quite substantial. People have billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions invested into that system. So we have a clean sheet design with a new set of stakeholders that believe in that Bitcoin story, but believe that the way to do that is by focusing on greater utility. Just like Bitcoin outperforms gold, Epic outperforms Bitcoin. And so it rests on really solid principles for us to believe that it's going to be a superior store of value over time. Like its job is to function as a battery, and it's standing on the shoulders of Bitcoin to take it to the next level, is how I look at it.
Okay, gotcha. So, I remember, I think a couple of years ago, it seemed like there was a big race between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. What are the developments there? What is Bitcoin Cash looking promising at all, or is that?
So there's actually three main forks of Bitcoin. What happened is the ANCAPs and agorists split off from the libertarians, and now there's three flavors of Bitcoin. There's BTC, or so-called Bitcoin Core. there's BCH, which is Bitcoin Cash, and then there's BSV, or Bitcoin Satoshi Vision. And the core disagreement in that dogma is over how to scale. They are all trying to resist centralization or go with it, as the case may be, in different ways, and therefore they have this irreconcilable religious schism about how to scale, but they all agree on 21 million coins in 2140. They all agree on proof of work and these other things that makes up what's known as Nakamoto consensus. Those other monetary, or those other assets, even including Ethereum, are not designed to be money, because they monkey with some of these parameters that special balance was found in Bitcoin, and nothing else is as good. And so they're not even trying, except for those handful of older alternative currencies like a Monero or Zcash, focused on hardcore privacy, or sort of Bitcoin Lite as an experimental network that Litecoin is. There's really nothing out there that preserves the magic of the original intention of Bitcoin, as well of the 4 flavors of Bitcoin, the 3 I just mentioned, plus Epic Cash, better than this newer version.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So you've got me sold. Epic Cash seems like something worth looking into, at least. I went online just quickly today. I was looking to see if is there a way that I can mine Epic Cash on my computer. I've got a Mac, by the way. I should.
Yeah, and I was going to mention, I would recommend that instead of buying it, just install the miner. We can include all the links in the show notes. There's
Awesome.
a great community of volunteers that are standing by around the world on a Telegram channel called Epic Cash Help Desk, where if you need help getting it configured, you can be up and running and mining within 5 minutes. It runs on Mac, even really older ones. Like a lot of people take old laptops out of the closet and plug them in because it's a free income stream, especially if you have bundled utilities or you're working off of solar or some other form of renewable energy. The economics of being able to convert renewable energy into financial value through this unique mining process is really kind of magical. And so I would recommend that, like the early days of Bitcoin, the way to do it is to get your feet wet with mining, because that helps secure the network. And then if it makes sense to convert some other digital assets, there's a decentralized exchange called Vitex that is the major trading venue. The good part about a decentralized exchange is you don't have to worry about identity theft by surrendering your KYC information. They do have some geographic restrictions as far as where they don't want to take people from, that people can choose whether or not to respect, but they don't ask for your ID. And so you don't have to worry about them selling your information or leaking it or trading against you. Or, I mean, the security practices of centralized exchanges are pretty terrible, and they're always leaking either financial value or personal identity information. And so with Vitex, you keep control of your keys. The transactions are transparently settled on chain, and you're working through another blockchain with other users on a P2P basis. So it's really in keeping with the ethos of censorship resistance. So I'll include another video, which is a quick how-to video of how to take your Bitcoin or Ether that you already have and get it over to Vitex to convert it into Epic. And the other thing that I should mention is that as of the end of the year, we're launching a new series of tokens. We're creating an algorithmic central bank based on smart contracts that use Ethereum and other blockchain networks for redundancy, where our equivalent of the Federal Reserve is the ECR, Every Citizen's Reserve. And so if you have digital assets that you put into a storage locker on a blockchain such as Ethereum, you can actually access an EUSD stablecoin credit line to get interest-free financing when you go to spend those dollars into the economy. That solves the, well, how do I buy groceries with it problem? Because it creates an incentive at a micro level. And the seigniorage profits, in other words, who benefits from the ownership of the system, those accrue to the community of user owners in a co-op model. And so if you own Epic, shortly in the coming new year, you'll be able to get one ECR token free for every Epic you own, and that bootstraps the next two phases of the network.
Interesting. Okay, so if I start mining this stuff, I have a wallet on my phone, I assume. I can access my Epic Cash from that, and can I convert it into fiat if I need to? How hard is that?
Yeah, so there's a variety of connection mechanisms that are being built out. All of this is, there's no central coordination point. It's not like there's an Epic Cash company or anything like Bitcoin. It's a network of independent participants who form an ecosystem. It's modeled closely after the Linux protocol, where nobody controls it, but many adjacent businesses help contribute to its natural evolution. And so we're working with another way that people can invest. Just to give a shout out to Patrick Moynihan, who's launching epicfunds.io this week. Accredited investors and international investors can access investment exposure to the Epic ecosystem in a variety of tax advantaged and fully compliant ways in the existing economy. And so if you visit epicfunds.io, you can take money that you already have that's sitting around, not just high risk, but also some fairly low risk stuff on the money market end. But really what we're trying to do is build out a whole suite of decentralized investment products that don't require people to surrender their privacy or their individual sovereignty over the money. And so we don't need to be the best coin or whatever. We just need to find a way to be useful for people. And so there's a whole ecosystem of startups, including one ecosystem venture fund to help support like an accelerator program, excuse me, called the EC Accelerator, for startups that are building around the unique micropayment capabilities that this chain provides. And so all that's coming online. It will get easier. And the ultimate goal is to enable people to exchange value online and offline just as easily as today. Ultimately, if it's not more convenient than the existing system, then I really think risk is a harder sell. Some people are risk averse, but most people, well, the dollar's been around my whole life. Of course, house prices always go up. Like, these black swan events are more common than people think. But up until then, there's an incentive to keep picking up nickels in front of steamrollers. And so you have all these market distortions like negative interest rates. Now, in this type of monetary structure, negative interest rates are impossible because confiscation is impossible. Now, there's extra legal methods and what is the role of the state in your income flow and companies and all this. But fundamentally, without the ability to wield violence, interest rates really can't go negative. And so this bizarre monetary experiment that we're seeing in the fiat world, increasingly the emperor has no clothes. And I think ultimately most of the existing value in the world ends up getting tokenized and traded and settled on these different blockchain networks. And so the epicenter, which is comprised of a family of digital assets that all work together, serve to connect these different individual blockchains that have certain properties, like Ethereum as a computer system, or some of the other Ethereum-like networks as a pure decentralized ledger. Like, no one technology is going to win. And there's a reason why investors have gotten so excited about this $500 billion asset class that didn't exist 10 years ago. It's because there is genuine value there, but it's hard to pick a winner. And so what we do is seed a whole field of startups that are out there iterating and evolving. And if they can add value for the users, then the value will naturally accrue. The basis of the system has to be non-coercive. And if you are not able to forcibly extract people's value, whether through an explicit taxation process like actual taxation, or a shady implicit confiscation mechanism like inflation, then that could unfold to some interesting properties for those of us who would like to see our liberties preserved rather than taken away, regardless of the reasons for those who want to take them away. how good it will be for us if they do. So these are kind of essential questions that as a purely monetary theorist guy, I choose not to get into. But we're seeing lots of appeal for the network, for content creators that would be subject to cancel culture and deplatforming. If you're demonetized, that cuts into your ability to reach your audience. And so one of our community members created a platform called Epic Fund Me that serves as a Patreon that connects people directly with no fees and nobody in the middle, so that your voice can never be shut down.
Wow.
So we're starting to see a lot of individual use cases where the convenience trade-offs versus the existing money system today are offset by those unique properties. And the history of technology shows us that these type of technologies start off as fairly niche, but then as they evolve, they can increase, they can reach greater and greater people. And so we look at Epic as not a plaything for bankers and speculators so much as a practical money system to replace physical cash in the battle for the so-called cashless society. One vision is central bank digital currencies that will carry over all of the ills of the existing system in terms of financial risk and all of the risks of the new system where cancel culture is now enforced in government. Because in China, if you criticize the government, your social credit score goes down and eventually you lose access to your money. And so increasingly people will have to sign up with the Federal Reserve or the central bank in their country to get their stimulus and their UBI, because the economies are being decimated through these not due to COVID, but due to the responses to COVID that seem to be very expensive in terms of their benefits, regardless of the merits, or the choices made. And so I think economic freedom is a bedrock of all of our other political freedoms, and the basis of economies is trade, and the basis of trade is payments. And so enabling someone in Africa to trade with someone in China instantly with nobody able to stop it, that's going to be very interesting in terms of preventing economic hitmen type of dynamics that have been increasingly at play since the world went off of the gold standard in 1971. So what a lot of people don't realize is that the current monetary system is the aberration, and the currency unit name is the same, but a different game was played pre-1971 when these currencies were backed ultimately to a finite supply of gold and unrestrained orgy of currency creation. And so these national debts are increasingly going into hyperdrive, and that's just a claim on people's future tax payments. And so this dynamic of currency being created into the economy at interest and loaned to national governments, pretty soon the economy just can't squeeze off enough juice anymore to satisfy the claims, and some reckoning needs to happen. And so the powers that be are already talking about a so-called Bretton Woods 2.0 arrangement to have them decide who gets seats at the table and what the terms of those deals are. And meanwhile, the free market has this what should we say, independent alternative that is resilient in the face of all attempts to maintain control. And so when I extrapolate the trends, I think that the people who buy into the idea of decentralized money, whether it's for long-term savings, speculation, or even just daily purchases, ultimately the money you use is a product of your beliefs. And if you're using fiat currencies, you are relying on violence to enforce that economic paradigm in the terms of trade with your counterparty. But if you use decentralized money, there's no coercion anywhere in the picture. And so I think it's more respectful. And I think that over time, the human relationships that are mediated through this trustless system will actually increase the amount of trust that people have in each other, as people are shown to be fundamentally good, and perhaps not in need of so much close supervision from the powers that be. So these are not my questions. I leave it to guys like you and Ron Paul to do this wonderful work. I just focus on the technical plumbing of getting these different value systems to connect together using decentralized technologies.
Well, I think that maybe we put a bit too much stock in preachers like like me. We can maybe get a message out there of liberty, but ultimately it's going to be the tools, I think, that set us free. And you guys are it sounds like you've created a wonderful tool. Yeah, were you involved in creating Epic Cash, or are you kind of just an enthusiastic supporter who's finding ways to leverage this new system to invest and do different things?
So by trade, I'm a professional digital asset investor. Of those 5,000 coins, if you look at the good ones, I've been treated very well by an ability to spot useful innovations early and then invest in them. And so I am an investor in Epic funds because I believe in the protocol, and I want to have a way within the existing economy to express that. And so the model that we have, since there's no company and no employees, is that individual people assemble into kind of little business opportunities around the blockchain, like I am with the investing in the funds business. I just help individual startups get started and help mentor and coach them, because I built a trading business in the physical economy and technology products for 20 years around the world. And so these weird little inefficient markets of digital assets were kind of second nature. And when you can have something go up 30% a day, again and again and again and again, you get situations like Bitcoin going from 1,000 to 20,000 back in 2017. And history doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes. And so there's profitable opportunities. And so, yes, to answer your question, I have contributed quite a bit to help the protocol get started and invested in other people's efforts to grow the ecosystem. But there's probably about 50 to 100 of us every day. We call ourselves the Freeman family, where we go online and we just work for maximum freedom for mankind through a new idea of a money system. And so we're finding a lot of appeal at the extreme freedom loving ends of the political spectrum. So libertarians, and then the more extreme forms of anarcho-capitalists, voluntarists, agorists. We try to stay very neutral at the protocol level and not opine on any of that stuff, but definitely a lot of us are early Bitcoin or Monero guys, and we saw a chance to return to the pure roots. And so we're all independent volunteers that just pitch in as we can on little projects. And so it's kind of a fleet of ships structure rather than one monolithic entity, which of course is greater for decentralized or decentralization.
Definitely. Well, man, you've given us a lot of information. I'm glad that guy gave me a piece of his mind on the YouTube comments. Usually I ignore those comments, but he started out with paying me with some compliments. So I was all ears when he said, "Hey, you guys need to talk about crypto." And I'm glad he connected me with you guys, Murray and the Freeman group there, doing all this great work. So I'm definitely going to be dusting off my old laptop and following your links that we're going to put down below in the show notes, and I'm going to get starting to mine, because I feel like the more of this stuff I have, the more resilient I'm going to be going forward. And so thanks for turning us on to this stuff and providing myself and my audience with this valuable insight. I really appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure. Keep up the good work, Tim.